Hello, welcome to the AI Lead Show, where we're focused on leading in the AI age. Today, we're going to focus on three key areas: alignment, clarity, and execution. I'm your host, Dr. Brian Lambert, the AI Lead, and thanks for joining us today. As we dive in, keep in mind the challenges that exist between strategy and execution from top down to bottom up. That middle zone we're going to zero in on today. We've got a great panel today. Hey guys, how you doing? We've got integrator, we've got scaler, we've got orchestrator. Good to see you. You know, AI tools aren't enough. We've got a lot to figure out in the AI space. Your teams are drowning in misinformation. And in this episode, we're going to unpack how to fix this execution fog, really. We probably all are in some sort of overwhelm. There's a lot coming at us. You know, if you're on LinkedIn like I am, everything is about AI. There's a lot of change every day. There seems to be some sort of advancement. And, you know, you may hear things about cleaning data or making sure we're ingesting data or what model are we running or here's a new way to do some sort of AI tool. So in this episode, we're going to help you lead through this fog, through the complexity, cut through the chaos, and we're going to share some practical strategies to get your teams aligned and also deliver real business impact with harnessing AI. As we talk about every show, we start with a bit of news. And today, the news is around, in the last week, this idea of where's the value? Where's the value? So, you know, you're seeing a robust amount, a lot of different AI co-pilot tools. There's a lot of fragmentation with the SaaS market, software as a service, where every software as a service application has also got a chat bot, it seems. So if you're in 20 different tools, you've got 20 different chat bots. This siloed adoption is creating chaotic environments. There's a lot to figure out, and things are still disconnected, even though we're starting this foundation of the AI age. And there's real risk to having that disconnect, that siloed view. And these individual moves that people are making on the edge, where fingers are on keyboards, these challenges exist in the context of what am I doing in my role? What should my team be doing? How are we all working together? We need to find a balance between empowering teams to innovate and maintaining security, integrity, and ensuring that our customers get what's valuable. So in the news, in that context, recent leadership challenges in the AI age have been making headlines, including Apple's shakeup of Siri leadership, the growing data divide in enterprises, the readiness of employees to embrace AI, and the dilemmas leaders face in balancing control versus empowerment. Apple has appointed a new leader to drive that AI development with Siri, highlighting the challenge of advancing cutting-edge AI while also maintaining balance and privacy protections. Many enterprises are now deploying hundreds of applications, creating significant data silos that leaders must address. Employees are becoming more ready to embrace AI than leaders realize. And in fact, there's a whole bunch of shadow AI happening as employees are engaged in AI. Leaders are grappling with the complex choices around control versus empowerment and stability versus agility in the AI era. One of the big news announcements for the past few days is that Anthropic and Databricks, both enterprise plays, are coming together. Anthropic and Databricks have announced a landmark 5-year deal that brings Anthropic's advanced AI tools, including the latest Claude 3.7 Sonnet, to the Databricks data intelligence platform. If you know anything about Databricks, they help provide data as a service in the cloud, bringing together everybody's disparate data sources and providing that foundation. There are many different vendors in that space, but this is a really interesting strategic collaboration that are going to make these Claude models available to over 10,000 companies through the Databricks platform. Native integration of Claude models into the Databricks platform will allow customers to build and deploy AI agents that can reason on their own enterprise data. We finally arrived at the age of enterprise AI, where custom applications will be built on top of an AI layer, where AI is harnessing enterprise data, and that's a really critical moment in the evolution of AI to move us from consumer AI in our phones to enterprise AI. Helping businesses overcome these challenges in building, deploying, and evaluating AI agents is going to be critical. And this partnership represents a real significant move in the AI industry. I think it could potentially revolutionize how businesses integrate and utilize AI technology in their enterprise. Let me bring the panel back. Gentlemen, thanks for joining. Scaler, orchestrator, and integrator. What do you think of the news? Anything that stands out from your perspective? I'd love to hear your commentary.
Well, I really care about just one thing as far as integration goes. Does everything talk to each other? And what I mean by that is the end user going to have to copy and paste something at any time, right? People have very little tolerance for adding something else to the workflow. So getting these things streamlined so the workflow is one cohesive line and doesn't require people to stray from that, that's the foundation, right? If you do not have that foundation built during integration, your AI strategy is just going to come off as being fragmented.
Yeah, and I'll pick up on that foundation point you just made there, because let's say that it just happens. In other words, people start using 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 applications, right, that are all AI based on their own in the field. That is a challenge, right? If you don't have the foundational part where you've got some understanding of the data sets that you intend to share, the same thing that happened 15 years ago with SaaS. You guys remember that? It was kind of funny because, here we thought, the people in the field were adopting and that was a good thing. And then we found out it wasn't such a good thing when they didn't talk to each other. And you go to a Dreamforce show and they'd say, can't you vendors just get along? So I think if companies do the foundational part first, I think it's going to be a big win, certainly not just short term, but long term.
Well, I'd say in the companies that, that I support, particularly in working with salespeople, right? And the time that I've been spending with them and how they're using, we talk about, you see that the Copilot's people are using that in siloed ways, right? And we're seeing that. I worked with 7 different people yesterday, and they all had different points of view about how they're using internal AI to do research and account planning, right? And how they're using that. And the organization has itself some rules that I'm not sure they're even aware of. So, and that's just one department, right? And just one group of one business unit among several. So really interesting to see that.
Yeah, and if you think about data as the new oil, or data as a valuable and precious resource, what we're seeing here is a move to actually harness that. So while Copilot, Microsoft Copilot or Gemini are inside and embedded in these applications, what they're really trying to do is help people be more productive with what they have and what they're working on. And if you pay attention to what Microsoft is talking about and how they're viewing the operating systems and the evolution of LLMs as almost this new operating system that talks to and orchestrates agents, you move really fast to this application of intelligence, and also the idea of we're all using the same data source. And that's really what this Databricks Anthropic partnership signifies. Is it's a real important distinction to move from everybody has their own siloed data and databases. Let's say you have 200 different SaaS applications, and you might have a Tableau reporting, or you may have SharePoint sites that are not even in these SaaS applications. But if all of that fragmented and siloed data is all stuck in those hardwired pockets of value, you're not going to have a very valuable AI, enterprise AI application. You're not going to be able to bring it all together. So this Databricks, news is significant in that if you look at how they integrate data, where they bring their data, how they're building out, some call it a data lake, some call it a data lake house, some call it a data layer. I call it a speed layer. Those types of applications that are able to use AI to structure the data up so it can be used by AI is a significant advancement in the application of AI in the enterprise. And I know Orchestrator, you've had some examples in the past of working through and trying to bring together people on the same page. What are your thoughts on this view of enterprise AI and the data level?
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it. I'm excited because, with SaaS in the early days, there wasn't a whole lot of capital flowing. Well, there's never been more capital flowing in a particular initiative like AI. One piece of news that came out just this morning, SoftBank leading a round with OpenAI for $40 billion. That's a private round. That's not even a public round now. So,
And that's with a
talk about,
B.
a value of approximately $300 billion. Now, it's not to say, it's an arms race and the companies that raise the most win. But what it is to say is that they're going to be in acquisition mode. They're not going to grow organic. It's fair to say, right? We've seen acquisitions with companies that are well-heeled, but they're going to pick strategic apps to hopefully go against this point about siloed apps. And how many times have we seen in the past where companies will buy an app for marketing, an app for sales, an app for services? Do they ever get along? I'm not talking about the people, I'm talking about the apps. So then you see a Zapier or somebody that comes on the scene as the plumbing, and that's good. But did they think through the metadata and the taxonomy so that they don't just talk to each other, they actually know each other's language? So there's a lot that's probably going to happen by just one company. So my experience in the past, Brian, is clients saying, can't you guys get along? Can't
That's
your
right.
systems talk to each other?
Yeah, that's right. And I talk about this idea of the data value chain in the AI lead book. And, admittedly, I never really thought much about this until 5 to 7 years ago. How does data become something that I can actually actualize in my own role? But there are a lot of moving parts to getting data right. And this data view is the foundation of great AI applications in the enterprise. And you have to have the data sources. You have to bring those in and store it somewhere. Then you have to have some sort of retrieval and search mechanism. Then you have to somehow analyze and visualize that. We're using machine learning for that these days. But when you get to the last two steps of synthesis and actualization, or what we would call generative capabilities, that's the end of the value chain that is so valuable for business people. And when you take this times 200 applications or 2,000 applications in the enterprise, you can see why this level of complexity might be overwhelming. But this is the world of AI in the enterprise. If it doesn't start there, it will not succeed. You have to have this data value chain working, and many of them working. And that means a lot of architecting, a lot of work to figure it out. So hopefully that helps for you that are attending the show live. We appreciate you here. Always chat in the chat box. We'd love to hear from you about these concepts and love to hear about what your take is on the news and what we're sharing. That audience participation is really valuable to us. And you never know, you might get 1 million points and make it on the show one day. All right. So what is our dilemma in this? Well, the dilemma is to actually make AI work, right? So we framed out all of this investment. We framed out all of this impact. But there's a dilemma in this. We've got to move beyond the idea of a tool or a application into driving business outcomes. We have to basically tie this all together. We have to integrate it. We have to orchestrate it. We have to scale it. We have to get cross-functional buy-in from the start. And that means we have to bring together IT and the business. We have to bring together the executive lens with the investments as well as the end users. That means we're operating in what we call the middle between the outside in and inside out. There's a middle. Then there's top down and bottom up. That's the middle, and that middle area is massive. It is not a small space. It is a massive space of data, information, technology, and of course, people. You know, a large logistics company, I was doing some research for this segment. They used generative AI pilot to reduce documentation errors, which cut customs delays in Europe. This shows how AI can scale if you clarify and align it to business outcomes. In this case, how do we clear customs faster? It seems myopic, but that can save you millions of dollars and generate billions of dollars in customer satisfaction. So any thoughts on this idea of our dilemma? How do you move from tools to outcomes?
You know, I look at it as almost an internal discussion and an external discussion, a customer centric. How do we use AI to solve the problems and these outcomes? But I think the other issue is internally, as an orchestrator was saying earlier, that you've got siloed still departments using AI by themselves, right? And they're treating it like a tool, okay, and they're getting things done internally, supposedly. But the question is, how do they take that those internal tools, internal AI applications, and focus on what's important for the customer? And I don't know. I see it as this again internal kind of external fight that's going on.
Yeah, I think the idea of how do organizations leverage AI to become more customer centric, more empathetic, that's going to create some friction in some organizations, and it will create some great energy and momentum in other organizations because of that data-driven, customer-centric view. That's a good point.
Yeah. So is it just marketing that uses it, to be more customer centric, and they're, working on their digital experience, and that's all that matters? And then internally, there's confusion about how departments are using AI to, navigate whatever they need to do internally. So
yeah,
I think it's still kind of messy.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that view, the execution gap, you've got the technical piece, you've got the business piece, you've got this idea of what does momentum look like, what is progress, and then also this idea of, are we actually aligned on the same thing? It's if you take the idea here that many AI pilots kind of get stuck and they don't move beyond pilot phase. Why is that? And there can be a disconnect between tech teams delivering advanced AI solutions. There are a lot of details and a lot of requirements, put it that way. And those requirements have to be defined by somebody. And typically that means business leaders and people doing the job and doing the work. Even when teams are theoretically aligned, there's often a misalignment in how they actually define and measure progress. And what is the definition of success? So these feedback loops from individuals have to be countered with what's the feedback loop from the market? What's the feedback loop from the competition? What's the feedback loop from, obviously, our customers, that outside in view that you're talking about, Scalar? That's really critical. And these things here that I'm showing on the screen here, what's the role of AI in overcoming these things? What are your thoughts on, this idea of there's a lot of fog that we need to cut through. There's a lot of stagnation and perhaps even some analysis paralysis here as we look at executing in enterprise AI.
Well, I think kind of comes down to the whole change management thing that we need to be communicating, and I don't think that's happening to a certain degree. I mean, again, let's say you're in sales, and it seems like they're treating it just like other applications. And let's say an organization has all these applications that are available, let's say to their salespeople, right? And they're trying to say, well, listen, we want you to use this one centralized hub to do all your planning, right? All your conversations with your prospects, all your research, and they're not doing it. And they're not embracing it because there's too many applications for them, and they're going rogue and doing what they want to do internally. And I guess the same thing's happening, as AI is being introduced. into these various departments that, hey, maybe I want to use this one because this works for me. So I don't know if there's enough direction or leadership yet, or a path that's laid out that everyone should be following. And I know that in the book there's a bit. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, no, I'll pick up on that point because one of the things, and I'm going to use an example here, Brian. Talked to a client last fall, and at that point, super excited about using AI. So now we're in spring of 2025, and they rolled out Gemini. That's fantastic, right? They rolled out Gemini. So what does that mean? They made it available to the team in the field, all the team in the field. They bought enough for the team in the field. So I'm kind of making light of this point, and that is that's not enough. You don't just make it available. This is not that technology. These models do not come ready-made for your vertical, your business. They will in the future, but they don't at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how many companies come around and say, hey, let's figure out how to train this thing. And then they'll stumble across a RAG, and then they'll figure out the vector database. And then they'll stop and say, I love that diagram you had a minute ago there, Brian. You can actually ingest something right now and in an hour be analyzing your legal agreements to see whether or not there's any gaps in a deal that you're working within an hour. You can go from ingest to actual business outcome in some cases in less than an hour. And I think if they lead with companies lead with these outcomes on, all right, so what do we want to get better at this year? And I'm in product development. So I'm way back, right? It's kind of fun to build new products, but wouldn't you want to build a product that people use?
Absolutely.
Because in a service world, if they don't use it, they don't buy more. And I think we learned that from Salesforce 20 years ago, and we kind of, drifted behind them and understood this point. But I'll give them a shout out because they did that right. So you just wonder, what if you had an AI note taker in the development, in the selling of it, in the support of it, that actually went across that and said, when they sold value, what do they actually use? And then in turn, not only what they use, when do they buy more? Who does that help? Go back to the development people. More is not more. They don't want you to give them another 100 features. I know this personally. I used to do it. I'd say, here's another 100 features, guys. And they'd say, could you just give us the 5 that matter? Well, how do I know? I didn't talk to every client. I didn't do every service call. So AI can actually do that, ingest that, and give you information later this week. As you can tell, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, it's a great point. If you just think about one document going through the value chain and the ability to chat with that one document, that actually is an important exercise because you can do it in less than an hour, and there's a way to pull that off. And then, to your point, orchestrator, the idea of chatting with that document can be improved on to actually learn with you. It can learn what you're asking. It can learn what you're focused on, and it actually can keep your chats in a safe place and learn what you are focused on over time. And so you have not only with AI the ability to retrieve and interact with a static asset called a PDF, you actually then have the ability to layer on a self-learning mechanism so things get better. And so as you interact with it, things get better, and it's magic, right? But that is very possible to build in less than 2 hours, right? So I think we can get tripped up with, well, we have 10 million documents and 5,000 SharePoint repositories. We're never going to get anywhere. And then I would say, to your point that you're making, orchestrator is, if you can't do it with one document, how are you going to do it with 5,000, right? So just start with one. There are even softwares you can spend $20 a month on right now that'll give you access to your own RAG, if you will. So, integrator, what are your thoughts on this concept of starting small and micro? What have you learned in your quest for knowledge and application?
Well, I learned that the biggest failure, and probably the most common one, has to do with not establishing value alignment from the very beginning. This was one of my screw-ups, right? Because I had built a number of things for the last company I worked for, and they had some really nice features. There was a meeting summary agent that did this and that and had all these different features, and a little transcription correction agent. I had all these different things that I had built, and when it came time to present it, I had built wonderful little video demos. I had a nice talk track for it and walked you through all the cool things that it did. And it was the worst demo I have ever delivered because nobody was impressed with the science. You know what I mean? Like the beauty, the science, the parsimony, the elegance of the solution. But then they said, time, money, or emotion. Why should we let you do this? And I'm just kind of like, because it's going to save you a ton of time. How much? How is it going to save us time? What I see is you having to copy and paste a bunch of stuff. So integration, value alignment from the very beginning, if you have that value alignment and you can draw that straight line in the pieces being connected in a linear way that people don't have to copy and paste and do other things, you will get adoption. People will adopt if it's easy to do, and if there's a clear business value, they'll do it. The failure in that case was completely mine. I don't doubt that I could have saved the company money or done a lot of these things with these tools. And I know they're still running with some of these ideas. It's simply I failed to communicate that value, and I failed to get alignment from the very beginning. It's easy to do when you're impressed with your work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying totally. I have empathy for this. This is a great middle discussion, right? So from a tech perspective, you've got the elegance, you know how hard it was to pull this off. And then from the business perspective, it's like, how come I have to copy paste? And it's like what's the middle ground in that? Right? If you were just only focused on the feature function and the bits and the bytes from a tech perspective, that would not be good. On the flip side, from a business perspective, if they're not willing to take a little bit of the copy pasting with the advancement in the tech, isn't there some business accountability in that conversation as well? Like, how do we all get along, and how do we meet in the middle here? Because the amount of work it took as an early adopter, if our lens on the Van Gogh painting is always, Van Gogh could have done better. That reaction not only stalls progress, but it actually stifles innovation. Because I think as humans, we're really wired to figure out what's wrong with something, as opposed to exploring what made it work so far, or what went well, or how'd you make it work at all, right? That curiosity driven approach to say, well, okay, Ken, I still have to copy paste here, but like, how did you get this to even work? Like, that would have gone a long way to helping them understand the value. So I think as humans, especially in business and sales, marketing, and these other areas that deal with a lot of polish, that deal with a lot of branded elements, that deal with the end result of high quality research and outputs and things like that, we can also shoot ourselves in the foot with innovation if that expectation is that anybody who's innovating has to bring the highly polished, final, refined everything in order for me to even weigh in on it. And in today's very cynical world of business, I think we're all trained to find what's wrong with something more than we're actually willing to ask that question that maybe we don't even know the answer to. And that I see it play out over and over again in this AI dilemma that we're in, this AI age. So let's keep moving through. Appreciate the soapbox on that. And let's talk about these evolutions of coming together. What if we move beyond job roles? What if we move to thinking about our roles as value creators and as AI innovators, as AI leaders, in the context of what needs to happen to make AI work? Well, to make AI work, you need a specialist that understands that technical piece. You need somebody who understands the data. You need somebody to synergize that with across the departments and the functions. You need somebody to make the integration work and make all of the tech work together. There's so much tech involved. It's hard to explain how many technologies are involved in making AI work. And then you need somebody to orchestrate all that. What if we thought about less about our job function and more about the hats that we wear to add value to our customers or to compete in the space? And I got to tell you, I've spent a lot of time, actually more than I thought that was going to happen, with what I would consider AI native organizations that are in startup mode, And these AI native organizations tend to organize themselves more like this, that I'm showing here on the screen, that you have an integrator, an analyst, a specialist, an orchestrator, and a synergist, as opposed to, I'm in marketing, I'm in tech, I'm the data person in tech. Well, I'm the analyst person in tech. Well, I'm the solution architect in tech. Or I'm in marketing, I'm the digital marketer. I'm not the brand marketer. I'm the event marketer, not the, digital marketer. All of these fragmented job views, they don't tend to show up when organizations and people are working in what I would consider AI native, because you know what? They're all feeding the same brain, the artificial intelligence brain. They're putting stuff in to get things out, and it's less about the department in the silo. Any
Big,
thoughts on that?
big theory here, Brian, if I can go for it.
Yeah.
But what if we actually looked at it as if you reported to the client every single day of your career, wherever you reported to the client? And I'll use an example of that because this is where customer success became a big deal in the service world. Is if the client wasn't happy, you didn't have a reference, they didn't tell 5 friends to buy your product, they didn't come back and buy more product. You guys know the score there. But what I love about this slide, just from the very beginning when you first flashed it up this morning, is that there are no departmental roles and preconceptions. It's just this work's got to get done. And whether you call it an AI native or an AI first company, I've heard both terms now in the industry. Why is it that startup companies? What's your theory on that, Brian? Why are startup companies so hell bent on focusing on the client and growth?
Yeah, I mean, from a survival perspective, but I also think when you look at
Yes.
the AI
Survival.
the AI stack, if you will, that tech is a yes, when you get into the data and you get into the vectors and you get into chunking and all these things, but when you put it in and you have, let's say, 500 documents and there's, I don't know, 40,000 chunks of data. Once you get past that, then you end up into the AI stack is a natural language. It's an NLP coding process. You're prompting these AI coding engines. You're prompting models like Claude by Anthropic. You're actually coding with natural language, and you're able to communicate. And I spent 3 days, 3 days over the weekend trying to even get a simple, what I considered simple action done through prompting. And it took a lot of work to get the AI to do what I wanted it to do. So that was the equivalent of coding today. So my point on that is, to be in these AI native, AI first organizations, it's about communication. Well, what are you communicating about? Well, you're communicating about value and the flow of that value to the market and to customers. And you're not spending all your time saying, well, that's not my job. Well, that's not my job. Well, whose job is it? I guess it's nobody's job. So we're not going to do it. Right. I'm being a little cynical here. But all of the amount of energy spent on who really should be doing something and who should not be doing something, all of that's baggage, and it doesn't even exist in these AI first companies, because when everybody feeds the AI engine and they're getting things back out, it doesn't matter who put it in. It matters what's the value coming out, right? And so if we organize ourselves into 75 different silos, how does that help us feed our AI engine? And that doesn't exist.
And just jumping in one last time, because the dialogue there was, out of survival, they align to the client. Why not align to the client? Whether you're a company that does 1 million, 10 million, or $1 billion, why not align to the client? And then ask the important question: is this going to add value to the client? And as we were building apps over the last couple of decades, we were told, build to a persona, build to a role, build to, a particular market, and then go dominate that. Why not? Because AI doesn't care what department you're in. I'll stop there, but you can see what I'm saying is that
Well, yeah,
it's fun to watch those startup companies go.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to draw this distinction, because if you go to anybody in a company right now and ask if they're customer centric, they're going to say yes. Absolutely, I'm customer centric. I wake up in the morning and I'm customer centric. We're talking about a different level of focusing on the customer with AI.
Yes.
It has to do with the fact that it's about value exchange and what is valuable to that client to get them to take action, versus I do work all day that I believe will eventually help the customer. Therefore, I'm customer centric. And these are important distinctions that I think AI native companies or AI first companies don't necessarily have, because they're testing with their customers, they're testing with their clients, right? It's immediate. I was on a call this morning. Somebody said, I don't like the format of that, right? Immediately, whatever the AI spit out, immediately judged. Nope, don't like it formatted. And to Integrator's point, all the magic behind the hood, it all came down to not a space between paragraphs. Don't like it. And that's custom.
Data curation. Without data curation, none of the magic
Well,
happens.
the data was curated. What I'm saying is that the customer didn't like the formatting. So they didn't like the formatting. That's customer centric.
But you were able to adapt right away.
Well, that's the thing. Now you have to go back and adapt and make the
Yeah.
tech work to put spaces between the paragraphs. Seems like an easy thing, but that's what being customer centric is today, is that immediate feedback like that. You know, not all the AI magic that went into pulling that off and generating that. They didn't even want to read it because they didn't like the formatting. Like that's where people are today, because of the world that we live in. It's very tailored, very personalized. I don't like the format, so I'm out. Right. So that level of customer centricity is hard to meet that expectation. And so I love what Orchestrator is saying, is focusing in on that is critical. Right. So let's go to the next piece here, which is, how do we break through this? How do we bring things together and achieve alignment with business and technology? How do we operate in the middle? Let's pretend in this example, let's go into the healthcare industry, and let's give ourselves a goal here that we want to reduce hospital readmissions by 15%. Like, how would we go about that? Well, if everybody goes into their silo and says, hey, let's all work on this 15% thing, what are the chances of that actually happening? Everybody in their silo, right? There's a technology piece, all of departments involved in the readmissions and admissions process, but more importantly, the surgeons, the nurses, the people that are actually delivering healthcare are going to have to be involved. So that means you have to bring together business, the hospital, the patient care, the patient outcomes, and you have to synchronize. What are your services you're providing? What are the aspects of that treatment plan and that healthcare we're providing? How do we close feedback loops? How do we drive down readmitting people? And that's an outcome that is critical to the health of the patients, but it's also critical to the idea of revenue, because the more beds you can keep free, the more people you can help. So if you do that, like, there's a lot to figure out. How do we do it at a data level? How do we do it at a technology level? What's our processes? What are our people? How do we think about this and report on it? How do we get visibility into 15%? What does that mean? There is a lot of what I would consider business and technology alignment, and that gray zone between collaboration and communication about the outcome and actually executing it are critical. And that's the key. You have to bring together the tech piece with the business piece to pull this off. And that's an important distinction here in today's AI age. There's a blending of AI and data and technology with the business, because a lot of the generative AI that's out there is really for the business, or in this case, the hospital patients and the care providers in that case, which is very, very data heavy in how things get done. Every medical device has telemetry, every chart, every patient record, right? Everything is data driven inside of hospitals these days.
Yeah, and Brian, what I think you're saying, right, is the fact that this just can't be an IT project, right? We really need to look and collaborate with all the different touch points when it comes to hospitals, as you said. And it's almost as if the technology, that layer, as they're working with all these different departments, and almost have to treat them as they're the customer in a sense, and have them involved. And if they do that in a collaborative way, then, from my standpoint, a scaler, when we talk about adoption, right, and using the technology to indeed reduce readmission rates by 15%. People being involved, different departments, nurses, surgeons, heck, janitorial people within the hospital will be much more motivated if they feel involved. And I would think that's a very simple concept. And that's how most organizations, I would imagine, are going to build this type of infrastructure to achieve these types of goals. Seems almost common sense, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Integrator, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think about the healthcare industry is kind of a little different from a lot of industries because you mentioned many data sources. Telemetry from medical devices, they all have different logs that go to different places. I look at it from a network perspective because I'm an old networking guy. So I think about all the logs from these devices, then you have the Epic healthcare system, and then you have any other patient records or device dumps like from MRI machines. This is all data that people are just going to say, let's throw that into a hopper and see what happens. The workflow has to be, it can't be dictated to the nurses on the floor, right? That's where adoption kind of gets stymied. I know that's the way it is in healthcare, is that if you're working on the floor, you get told about something and maybe they make you stay late one day to take a 4-hour training on the new system. You got to have people piloting from the very get-go on these things, because only then are you going to be able to really articulate value to the people who matter the most, and that's the users. Like Scalar said, our customers.
Yeah, and like what Orchestrator was sharing earlier, like, okay, let's all be customer centric for sure, and okay, we're going to sign up for this 15% reduction in readmissions. So that's the outcome. And then how do you orchestrate and how do you drive value in what you're doing, and what's that flow of work that happens to achieve that reduction? And I think it's less about what department you're in and more about, dare I say it, the service you provide to others. I think the AI age is going to enable us to move from, hey, we create outputs, right? Which has been a huge piece of the industrial age. Manufacturing, outputs, assets, white papers, webinars. We can produce all of these assets. Well, from a customer-centric part of the AI age, well, you don't actually need those assets. You just need a generative AI engine and a lot of good questions, because you could get the answers with AI. You don't necessarily need them in a white paper or a webinar or even on this show, right? Which is why we came up with this show format, is because, you might not know what questions to even ask. And that's why the show is here. But if you know what questions to ask, you can go to AI and you don't need a white paper. You don't even need a course. You don't even need to sit in a classroom in some of this. I've learned how to code and learned about a lot of tools without ever being in a classroom because I have generative AI. So when you take away this idea that we're going to produce outputs and that's what our value is creating the outputs, and you start moving into, well, what are we going to generate and what are we going to do with what we generate? You end up in the space of we're serving each other, ideally. And the services we provide to achieve a 15% reduction in readmissions, those services we provide to each other is way more critical than delegating, mandating, sending outputs to each other, whatever. And that's where generative AI is going to start coming in. The G of generative AI is the fact that you can actually get the help you need. Then it becomes, what do you do with it? And in the past, it was lob it over the fence and there's your help. Let us know how you like it. Actually, better yet, don't let us know if you like it or not. We just did our value. We added our value. Here you go. Lob it over. We're done. Boy, are we busy, right? In the world of 2 years from now, or what these AI native companies are doing right now is, well, if that's our goal, how do we get there? What do we need? And what do I need to do to help us achieve this outcome? How do I serve the outcome? How do I serve each other? How do we serve each other? So moving from deliverables and outputs to services and the flow of value is a radical shift for how work gets done. And I believe AI is going to help us get there.
Brian, can I pick up on that radical shift?
Yeah, sure.
I was looking at, words or two to kind of get me going. So with radical shift, we used to talk about onboarding as a 30-day affair.
Yeah.
Remember those boot camps you went to for a week or whatever? And after the boot camp, you were ready. So I worked with one of the nation's largest healthcare companies here in Minneapolis. You could probably demise which company that is, top 10 company in the U.S. And it was interesting to sit down with their sellers and understand, and there's thousands of them, that when they sell and market, they have to know the particular county they're selling into, because the messaging there is different than the county across town, which is way different than another state, which is way different than the federal government sales. You get my point, right? So how do you enable them in advance? Well, you're not going to come up with 1,000 playbooks. It just won't work. It won't scale. So you couldn't really do continuous learning, is my point. And onboarding should be everboarding. Just a thought. And so as you think about everboarding, as you think about continuous learning, what if AI was coaching you as you were selling, but actually using what makes you great as a company? The company I just mentioned, it's a great company and amazing, talented people. But what if you were to harness that and then actually use that as you're interacting with a client? But you can't just turn on Gemini. You can't just turn on Claude. You can't just turn on OpenAI. All the Teams edition's pretty cool. You can't just turn these things on. So for me at this point, what's exciting is that some of the ideas we had long ago that we couldn't deploy, we just didn't have enough people to generate all the content. I use the extreme example there because you can't use the same brochure.
That's
depending
right.
on where you're selling and who you're selling to. And by the way, this person you're selling to doesn't want to buy all the insurance from you. They want to buy just some of the insurance from you.
That's
So don't
right.
give me the book, give me the one pager. I'll stop there, but I think generative AI has a shot if companies put the foundation in to train these models to what made them great.
Yeah, that's really what it's all about. Is your differentiation doesn't lie outside your company, because that's going to get ingested by somebody's bot. So if it's on your website, it's already being used. You can fight that legal battle if you want to, but it's already embedded in every model out there if it's on the web. Now what do you do, right? So these assets that are created, even though they're behind firewalls or login forms, is that really your value, or is it something else? And that competitive advantage, that differentiation, the core of your company, that's what you want enterprise AI to enable and to sit on top of, to your point. Absolutely. So how do we get there, integrator? What do we do next? How much money do you need, integrator?
Choose your data wisely. Start very, very small. Start with something that barely makes an
There you
impact.
go. That's wise advice. Instead of
because
asking for $20 million.
You're setting up the trust, right? You're setting up the trust, and you're buying that alignment every single week. As far as what it can do, in skilled hands, it can already do a lot. Now, since I've been playing with this for a long time, I mean, some people say work, some people say play. I've gotten really good at making things work at the copy and paste level, and that works for me. One of the things you can do is try to find people who have those skills. And I'm talking about, like, when you're talking about hiring, hire someone with a history degree, with an English literature degree, because natural language is ultimately going to be ruled by the most cunning linguists among us, right? So I feel like language skills are much more important in engineering than they used to be. That's just kind of my random musing here. But what it comes down to is, to get it ready for everybody to use is probably going to take longer than we think. But if we can meet AI in the middle, so to speak, get people to develop and cultivate those skills and competencies where they can think critically about those outputs and do that editorial process very, very quickly, and discern good data from bad data. If you could actually train people in critical thinking, that would be the best solution. But we keep on working on making it easier to use, because that's impossible.
Yeah, and you're bringing up a lot of great points. I think coding with natural language, communicating with these AI bots, you have to be very structured and precise. even if you're writing a 6-page prompt. You know, a lot of people think prompting is just one question, but I've seen 6-page prompts. It's crazy. And you know what? It's happening in milliseconds back and forth. But you're bringing up a really great point and kind of a Zen discussion. One of the things that struck me as I was thinking about and preparing for this idea of how do we lead in the middle is really to take a step back and to focus on the humanness of all this. In the AI Lead book, I call it an empathetic organization. What are we empathetic to, or who are we empathetic towards? And obviously, you know, me being my background in sales and marketing, I think we need more empathy for our customers and our buyers. We need more empathy for what outcomes they're trying to drive. We need more empathy for understanding that sometimes people, even in leadership roles, don't have the answers, and they actually don't even know what questions to ask, let alone action these things. So the human aspect of figuring this out together is critical. And that means we have to be thoughtful. To, you know, integrator's point, we need some critical thinking skills here. And really what I would encourage our listeners and our viewers to do is, you know, take it from us. We give you permission to get off the treadmill for a half a day to figure this stuff out. I know everybody's on the treadmill and there's no time to do any of this. Well, what if this the shoveling that you're doing and the digging that you're doing is in a paradigm that's going to go away in the next 5 years? Would you keep digging? Would you keep really pounding that treadmill over the next 5 years, or would you dedicate some time here to think about the fact that perhaps your role, as you know it, might move less to polishing assets and more about feeding bots what they need to generate outputs? You know, that's a crazy thought to some people, but you know, we've got to think about what's really happening here. This is not a flash in the pan, and it's not going to go away. So the human aspect of this, I call it amplifying intelligence, not artificial intelligence. The artificial word, you know, let's move away from thinking that's a negative to thinking about how it can amplify us. That means we have to think about the value we create, the flow of that value to serve each other and our customers, and think about the human aspect of freeing people up to be creative. And more importantly, what if AI helped us solve cancer and cure cancer? What if AI helped us find new minerals or new power sources? What if AI helped us get to Mars? Right? These things are really possible, but they're not going to happen if it's like, well, you know what, that's not my job, or you know, I'm not part of this new future. I'm washed up, and you know, I'm just going to ride my retirement out. Like, I've heard that from people. Yeah. So these things are important to think about. So this idea of finding the inner stillness, you know, thinking about it as integrator said, perhaps a little in a Zen moment here, to take a look and to think about this. What are your thoughts, you know, Pamela? What do you think about this idea of taking a step back here and really thinking through how you're going to be intentional?
One of my favorite examples is at the 3M Corporation years ago. Post-it notes was a mistake. So yeah. The beauty of being in the engineering organization over there was that they would give you so many hours a week to do whatever the hell you wanted. Think about that. You're an engineer, right? You have a chance to do what you want. But there were ideas that were being developed within this big major company with big silos in place. But that engineering group, I just wonder, take that same idea, Brian, into the organizations of today, every organization, and then ask people across the organization to spend an hour a week, whether it be, you know, during working hours or off, trying to understand how they can be 10x'd through AI technology, and just have them start using it. You don't have to do 6-page prompts. Be careful for that. By the way, AI can generate prompts for you. You know, it's funny because once the company gives the latitude for people to use technology to its strengths, Post-it notes sold very well. He was a very popular gentleman too, by the way. And it was kind of a fun time because it was case in point of an idea that maybe went wrong, but then all of a sudden went really right. But that's because the power of the organization kind of lifted that up and said, hey, maybe we could use it not for the, you know, adhesive group, but we could use it over here. And it'll post a note, but not much else. But it actually did sell like gangbusters. It's a great story, and the real point there being is that how do we give people time in their day to understand how to leverage this tech?
Yeah, absolutely. And being intentional, like what number would it be? Well, let's say in a perfect world, you could spend 20% of your time working on this AI thing, or just figuring it out, or exploring it. 20% of your time. You know what? That's one full day a week. Oh, I can't do that. Well, how about 10% of your time? Oh, I can't do that either. Half a day? I can't take a half a day. And I would say, I would encourage you to think about that. Perhaps you can. So as we're winding down the show today, we've covered a lot of ground in this middle space between strategy and execution, the middle space between being empathetic for customers and getting the tech out there, and the middle space of thinking about how do we harness AI's capabilities. Panel, integrator, orchestrator, scaler, what are some of your aha moments from the show today that you want to share with our viewers and our listeners?
Well, my big aha was when Integrator was talking about the fact that there's copying and pasting, and that's how people are using AI as a tool. And for someone that supports a lot of salespeople, I see all these templates that could easily be filled out, if they were integrated with AI, where they didn't have to use an outside source, right, an application to copy and paste all that information. And why is that not happening?
Big
that's
question.
the thing. Control. They're afraid. I'm assuming.
Or they're waiting, or they don't have the resources, or there a lot of things that my dad used to call excuses.
Is that what those? Yeah.
There could also be regulatory compliance problems too, they haven't solved yet. I know that you got to be really careful.
Yeah, there's regulatory, there's legal questions. I mean, a lot of the conversations in legal right now, absolutely. But that's why this is a leadership challenge as much as anything else. Integrator, what are some of your aha moments?
My biggest one, and unfortunate as this is, from an engineering perspective, you kind of look at humans as either being the problem or the solution, right? And being in an IT department, I have an IT background. I always looked at humans as the problem. You're not using it right. You're not doing it right. You're supposed to turn it off and back on again, that kind of stuff. But what I'm realizing more and more is that in the age of AI, humans need to be the solution. And I don't mean the humans who are building it. I mean the humans who are using it. They need to be integrated very early on into the process, because really, integration isn't about anything more complicated than the organization's readiness to adopt. And the only way you can make it ready to adopt is to view people as the solution.
Great points. Orchestrator, how about you?
A couple ideas, but one is just knock down the silos. We come back to that every show we do, Brian. And AI doesn't give a damn which group you're part of. Yeah. And it has done analysis across the industry for you. So just use its strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the roles that are using AI, it's pretty fascinating to see everything from how do you fix plumbing to how do you code, or how do you do a science experiment. I mean, the domain here of AI's reach and power as it starts to permutate the entire fabric, of society is pretty massive. So if you think about it as an electrical source, that's my aha, is moving beyond the, I'm tangled, I can't do it, not my job, somebody else will figure this out, nobody's told me to do this, really asking yourself, what strikes me about today's conversation is these are leadership decisions and leadership challenges. It's less about the tech. The aha moment here is, the tech already exists. The tech actually works. The challenge is how do you use it, and are you going to use it, and when are you going to use it, and how do you get started? These are leadership challenges. And so if we view this less as a tech experiment and more of a leadership experiment, there's a lot we can do in the space of the AI age to make an impact. And you never know, you might find yourself in a role where you're actually helping put somebody on Mars or curing cancer. So thanks for joining, everybody. I appreciate your time in what we were discovering and what we were discussing. I want to invite you to attend our webinars on Digital Command. If you go to digitalcommand.co/webinars. Also get a copy of the AI Lead book anywhere books are sold. It's an Amazon bestseller. It's won 8 book awards. It's pretty amazing to see how everybody has contributed to the creation of this book through their questions and curiosity. And I hope you find it valuable as you explore taking the AI lead. On behalf of the orchestrator, scaler, and integrator, this is Brian Lambert. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you next week, Friday at noon Eastern, for our next show. Take care.